Hello, we are going to explore leading lines. Lines, horizontal, vertical, implied, all different kinds of lines. And we're going to explore shape. Shape and form. We're going to learn about those. So let's hop in. So right off the bat, I've got a line running across the top of this image that these birds are sitting on. So it just leads us across. Our eye naturally follows lines within an image. Here are some more lines. The bus is taking us down the street on a line, and playing with color. Color is really important in that image. The smaller black and white image, we've got line that is defining the train from the people. So we're being pulled down that space. We've got this line coming up from above, this roadway leading us around the frame. And then down on the lower part, you see the curve of the line leading us into the frame as well. So we're just being pushed and pulled by lines. Right down that street. Classic line shot. Very symmetrical, balanced. More leading line. A few of you, I've said, you might want to play with depth of field on an image like this, where you shoot it at f2, f8, f22. When you do that, you'd want to photograph about 1/3 of the way into the scene, get a correct exposure at f2, leave your focus set 1/3 of the way into the scene, get a correct exposure at f8, shoot that, and the same thing f22, leave the exposure set 1/3 of the way into the frame, and expose properly for f22. See what it does. Those are great ways to learn about your camera and your gear. If you're using a cell phone, you can tap the screen to set your point of focus. You can do the same thing. Here's line that becomes shape. I shot this, maybe 10 or 12 frames with people coming and going. I have frames without people, but I kind of like the stance with this fella in the background. And we've got pattern. The brick becomes pattern. We've got the line leading us around the frame here on the golf course. And it was really important to me to have the cart sign up at the front to help let people know where we might be. So anything that you can do to add context to your image to help tell your story, that's a good thing. So carts leading us to this tree, a beautiful moody day, play with line. And I guess zigzag, so I love that shot. Walking down the street here in Santa Fe, I shot this. The fence acts as a line up to the truck, but the shadow and the texture, everything comes into play here and holds your attention. Out at the beach, the lines in the sand, but with this object. I always talk about gridding and diptychs and triptychs, and I really was thinking about that when I made this image, that trying to get 3 that would work together. So how many did I take to get the 3 that worked together? A whole heck of a lot. And I keep playing with them. I keep changing it up. More lines, a single line, a triple line, and even more. So a progression, just looking up at power lines in the sky. And what also is kind of interesting is the color of the sky, that little bit of cloud even. Lines in nature. Power lines are everywhere. I use it to divide the frame here and to call attention to man in nature. That line pulling us up the top of that building and just having some fun with some play in editing here. That was a Hipstamatic app. If you guys are looking for apps, that's a good one. Does anyone recognize this? It's down on Fremont Street, the zip lines. Lines leading us out of this tunnel. That becomes shape too. Maybe form. So we've got the leading line at the front pulling us into that frame, into the building, the Sea Park Hotel there. You've got that office arrow. That's an implied line leading us out of the frame. And then all just the congestion of power lines up above. Classic city shot, lots of lines, and the shadow starts to become shape. The ducks are an implied line. They're following the goose or the geese. So you can find lines in a lot of places. Once you start looking, you're going to see them everywhere. I'm always walking around, lines, lines, lines. So now we start to play with shape. So this is line and shape. It's implied. It's pushing us up towards the top of the frame. And it's also got beautiful texture. Shape is two-dimensional. The shape in a photograph doesn't have any depth. Shapes and line. This is more form than shape because it has dimension to it, being created by the shadows. One thing I want to point out is that you get the full circular element happening there, the inner circle, and it creates tension on three edges. The top edge, but we're not cropping off that circle. The side edge, we still have the inner circle, and then on the far left side, where we're just cropping it. So that's framing. It's cropping in the camera, so framing. I did not crop this in Photoshop or Lightroom. This was done in camera. So really try to make as tight of an image as you can in your camera. And don't be afraid to play with multiple shots to pick the one good one. I once again probably shot 4, 5, 6 images of this, playing with moving around it, trying to, find what I wanted to be my final image. And I knew that when I got home and looked at them. I didn't know it when I was there. I thought a different one. That happens frequently. So we got some shape. This is a super wide angle lens, you guys. It's like a 7mm, which in 35mm world is 14. Did you know with your cell phones you can get add-on lenses that can give you this effect, a super wide angle? I play with add-on lenses to my cell phone all the time, and we're going to be learning about what different lenses do coming up soon. But some shape, line, shape, texture, lots of texture. I love all the textures in this. The reason I took this also was those bicycles up top. They add a human element. So it takes it away from just being a shot about texture and line and shadow to adding people back into the equation. Lots of line, a little nature. I love this foreground of the stop sign just whacking you in the face. And then you can travel back in space to this building that is just fascinating to look at if you like older structures that are falling down with paint and texture and all sorts of things. So every element in here is thought out. And this, once again, was another wide angle lens. Shape. Shape is created here with the shadow as well. So the roof is creating that triangular shape at the bottom that is pushing us into the mural in the front of the building. Aw, the shape around the puppy. It's also a line. So line and shape. So we've got some patterns starting here. So when lines, shapes, and forms repeat, you get pattern. So you've got pattern up at the top. We have pattern at the bottom. We have pattern in the bricks. Pattern and shape. So I love things like this. I love finding spaces that just have such life. They show the history. Same here. We've got pattern and shape and line. Notice the bench is not dead center in this frame. Intentionally put off to the side to move our eye across. But I was playing with centering with the top forms and those pillars type things in the background. But the bench was really, it couldn't be centered. We're using the shape of these windows to define the man outside on the street. And look at the depth. We got a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, something that I talk about a lot. I love shooting from an airplane. I'm always looking for the lines that are created by man, and here we have some roads. One of my favorite shots of recent years. This woman, and I didn't even see her when I shot it initially. And then I'm like looking and I'm looking and I go back and I'm like, oh wow, I got to go back and rephotograph this. And I got lucky and managed to fit her perfectly in that triangular shape created by those lines. So lots of lines, and then the surprise of having this human there. Texture everywhere. And this is the last photo I'm going to show you, all lines and shapes. It's one of my favorites, also of recent years. I love how I managed to frame the water tower in the background. And when I made this image, I was shooting other water towers, and I was looking for water towers, and then I found the playground. I'm like, oh wow, this is going to be great. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been shooting water towers all over the country when I find them. And they, you have to look for something interesting with the water tower as well, because they're many times quite dull. But if you can give it a context, give it a place, give it something to play off of, it's going to tell a greater story. So I'm ending with this one, and I love how the jungle gym is framing that water tower in the background. So lines, shapes, form, think about pattern, think about everything that's in that frame, and that's our next assignment. Go look for this stuff.